And that would enable 250 bombs and 250 Nazi fighting planes to raid London every night for 2 months. And that, ladies and gentlemen, winds up another edition of the Jurgens Journal until next Sunday night at the very same time. Until then, and with lotions of love, I remain your New York correspondent, Walter Winchell, who reminds you of the great difference in two systems of government. Rudolf Hess preferred to bail out over Britain than be out on bail in Berlin. Good night.
December 7th, 1941, from Washington. Albert Warner summarizes the reports coming from Pearl Harbor.
The details are not available. They will be in a few minutes. The White House is now giving out a statement. The attack apparently was made on all naval and military activities on the principal island of Oahu. The president's brief statement was read to reporters by Stephen Early, the president's secretary. A Japanese attack upon Pearl Harbor naturally would mean war. Such an attack would naturally bring a counterattack, and hostilities of this kind would naturally mean that the president would ask Congress for a declaration of war. There is no doubt from the temper of Congress that such a declaration would be granted. This morning, Secretary Hull talked with the Secretaries of War and of the Navy. Now the two special Japanese envoys, Admiral Nomura and Special Envoy Caruso, are at the State Department, engaged in conference with Secretary of State Hull. Their appearance at the State Department on this Sunday afternoon emphasizes the gravity of the Far Eastern situation, where hostilities now seem to be actually opening over the whole South Pacific. Even more important than the visit of Tokyo's diplomats is this news which comes from Pearl Harbor and the news which comes from South Asia. Whatever the diplomats from Tokyo or the cabinet in Tokyo may be saying, there is a conviction in official quarters here that Japan has now cast the die. And just now comes the word from the president's office that a second air attack has been reported on Army and Navy bases in Manila. Thus, we have official announcements from the White House that Japanese airplanes have attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii and have now attacked Army and Navy bases in Manila. We return you now to New York, and we'll give you later information as it comes along from the White House.
Senators and representatives, I have the distinguished honor of presenting the President of the United States.
Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. Indeed, 1 hour after Japanese air squadrons had commenced bombing in the American island of Oahu, the Japanese ambassador to the United States and his colleague delivered to our Secretary of State a formal reply to a recent American message. And while this reply stated that it seemed useless to continue the existing diplomatic negotiations, it contained no threat or hint of war or of armed attack. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. In addition, American ships have been reported torpedoed on the high seas between San Francisco and Honolulu. Yesterday, the Japanese government also launched an attack against Malaya. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Hong Kong. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Guam. Last night, Japanese forces attacked the Philippine Islands. Last night, the Japanese attacked Wake Island. And this morning, the Japanese attacked Midway Island. Japan has therefore undertaken a surprise offensive extending throughout the Pacific area. The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves. The people of the United States have already formed their opinions and well understand the implications to the very life and safety of our nation. As Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense, but always will our whole nation remember the character of the onslaught against us.
First, the highlights in the war news before taking you to Washington for the direct report on important developments there. Berlin reports Japanese troops have crossed Thailand's border and have started to drive on the Burma Road. The report that Japanese troops have landed on Lubang Island in the Philippines is not confirmed. The island of Guam is reported still in American hands. Manila has had new air raid alarms, but no bombings are reported, and it's believed fifth column action may have been responsible. The latest CBS message from Honolulu says Hawaii is calm and morale high. The latest claims of the Japanese High Command reported in propaganda broadcasts from Tokyo describe destructive air raids on Malaya and a land attack on both Singapore and the British colony of Hong Kong. But the British say all these attacks are being resisted successfully. No confirmation yet as to whether the Nazis intend to declare war on the United States or whether Hitler will address the Reichstag as rumored. Russia seems to be doing better in the Moscow front, and Berlin makes no claims at all. Those are the highlights in the news to this moment.
This is William Winter speaking in San Francisco. San Francisco experienced its first taste of air raid warning last night. And when a second and a third alarm sounded during the night, San Franciscans seem to have become used to living in a city at war. Today, people seem to be going about their business as usual, except that the conversations in restaurants and street corners concerned the latest reports of Japan's attack in the Pacific, and people talked proudly about how they had remained calm through the night. A few minutes ago, the mayor of the city held a meeting of all civilian defense authorities in his office, and arrangements were made to broadcast air raid warnings over all radio stations in this area before they go off the air in the event of emergency. Instructions for air raid precaution were announced. People are to remain in their houses, stay off the streets wherever possible. Motorists hearing air raid alarms are to pull their cars to the curb, turn out the auto lights, and go to the nearest shelter. Householders were instructed to keep bags of sand handy around the house and keep bathtubs filled with water and keep garden hoses connected to faucets, just in case. At the meeting, Lieutenant General DeWitt, commanding the 4th Army of the United States, announced that last night's blackout of San Francisco was unsatisfactory. Death and destruction at any moment is now a possibility for an indefinite time as far as this coast is concerned, he said. Last night's air raid warning was not a practice warning. Enemy planes were over this area last night for an indefinite period, and why they did not bomb San Francisco, only God knows. Mayor LaGuardia and his Assistant Administrator of Civilian Defense, Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, are in Los Angeles now conferring with officials and there is word that they're expected soon in San Francisco. In San Diego, California, a group of Japanese, German, and Italian aliens are still in custody in local jails. Sacramento, the state capital, reports that the recruiting picture has changed overnight, and from border to border, from Canada to Mexico, draftees who once sought exemption now are clamoring to get into uniform. In Fresno, California, 2 Japanese were arrested. Their automobiles and elaborate motion picture and sound equipment was seized by police. Word has just come that some 91 Japanese, 60 German, and 16 Italian nationals have been taken into custody in Northern California by the FBI. And instructions have come from Washington, D.C. that no further Germans and Italians will be admitted to American citizenship until further notice. And this is William Winter in San Francisco, returning you to New York.
Go ahead, London.
London is not blinded by the fighting in the Pacific sector to the fact that there are many other sectors. In Russia, the Moscow radio broadcast a special announcement that Russian troops have recaptured Tikhvin in the north, and we heard that broadcast in London. In Libya, the main fighting is apparently still going on between Tobruk and Bir el Gobi. Mobile British columns are also operating toward the enemy's lines of communications west of Tobruk, but here British action is limited by the presence at El Adam of a big enemy force of all arms. British coastal command planes attacked a large enemy supply ship off the Dutch coast and left the vessel on fire. The British National Service bill to mobilize fully Britain's man and woman power was read and discussed in Commons today, but there was no vote. Since the Axis struck openly at America, I've been talking to a great many Englishmen. But tonight, I had dinner with a large group of American reporters and correspondents who have been covering the war in Europe, only to find that the latest war news is now being made in America. These men and women who have watched the principal nations of the world drawn into the Second World War one by one were united tonight by 2 emotions. The first is a keen longing to be at home in this critical period. The second is a feeling of deep disappointment. Year after year, these American reporters have roamed the world to get the true story and to send it home. And now apparently the United States has been the victim of a sudden attack, and we here have suffered heavily. American reporters feel their work has been a failure. They have told the story year after year, but their fellow Americans would not pay any attention. And that's the brief story from London.
On December 11th, 1941, Hitler addresses the Reichstag and declares war on the United States.
Artikel 4. Dieses Abkommen tritt sofort mit seiner Unterzeichnung in Kraft und bleibt ebenso lange wie der Dreimächte-Pakt vom 27. September 1940 in Geltung. Die hohen vertragswidrigen Teile werden sich rechtzeitig vor Ablauf dieser Geltungsdauer über die weitere Gestaltung ihrer im Artikel 3 dieses Abkommens vorgesehenen Zusammenarbeit verständigen. Abgeordnete, Männer des Deutschen Reichstags, wir sind uns schon seit der Ablehnung des letzten Friedensvorschlags.
Countries like the United States and Great Britain are so backward that we will not accept any gifts from them. And these countries have done everything to prevent both Germany and Italy from creating the conditions necessary for their existence. But today, in 1,000 years of history, Germany has never been as united in National Socialism as before in any time of its history. And therefore, she will have the strength to secure for herself the conditions which are necessary for the fulfillment of her existence. National Socialist Germany is not only united, but has already far more foresight and a greater sense of honor than before. And therefore, I have given today the American chargé d'affaires his passports.